Have you ever been betrayed by the very person you trusted the most? Someone who knew your dreams, your secrets, your soul, and then turned around and tried to profit from it like it was theirs to sell? If so, then I need you to stay right here, because this story, it's not just about art. It's about reclaiming your power when someone tries to paint you into a corner. It's about the kind of betrayal that doesn't just sting, it rewrites the script of your entire life. And trust me, the twist I pulled at the end will leave you stunned, and maybe, just maybe, a little inspired too. Before we dive into the mess of lawsuits, gallery owners, and those haunting words, half of it is mine. I want to look you in the eye for a second, metaphorically speaking, and say, I know what it's like to feel powerless. To watch someone walk off with something you built with your bare hands, whether it's your home, your dreams, your peace, or in my case, my art. But this story isn't about staying down. It's about the comeback. And if you've ever lost something or someone and had to start again from scratch, this isn't just my story. It's yours too. You clicked on this video because that title pulled you in. My ex claimed half my art, so I painted over it and sold it all. And you want to know, did I really destroy my life's work? Was it legal? Was it revenge? Was it justice? I promise you, you're going to get every answer you're searching for right here. But you've got to stick with me to the very end. Because nothing in this story is what it seems. Every canvas, every brushstroke, every silent cry under the smell of acrylic and heartbreak, there was a reason for all of it. And the ending? I still get chills thinking about it. Let's start at the beginning, though. Back when things still felt like love. Back when I didn't realize that falling in love with someone who doesn't respect your soul is like handing them a match and standing beside a pile of everything you've ever created. My name is Theo. I live in a little studio loft in Brooklyn. Exposed brick, high ceilings, paint-stained floors that scream of late nights and wild dreams. Art isn't just what I do, it's who I am. Or at least it was, until my ex decided it was hers too. You see, she wasn't just my partner. She was a part of the story behind every single piece I painted. Some would say she was my muse, but that's not entirely accurate. She was more like the echo in the background, sometimes soft, sometimes deafening, always there. We built a life together around my art. She handled the business side. Gallery bookings, invoices, brand meetings. I was the heart, she was the hands, or so I thought. I painted. She planned. It worked until it didn't. Our breakup wasn't explosive. It was quiet, surgical, like she'd been preparing the whole time. And when she walked out of our shared apartment, she took more than her clothes and her perfume bottles. She took paperwork, receipts, contracts I never read. And then, out of nowhere, I got served. She claimed half the rights to my portfolio. Not just the future work, half of everything I had already made. And she had the signatures, the documents, and the sleazy attorney to prove it. I was stunned. I remember sitting in my studio, surrounded by canvases that had taken years of my life, feeling like I was about to lose my own children. Every brushstroke carried a story. Every color had meaning. And now, they were being reduced to dollar signs in a courtroom. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My hands trembled when I picked up a brush. She wanted to sell my work and walk away with 50% of it. Work that came from my pain, my hands, my life. But I wasn't about to let her. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. Because instead of fighting her in court, I fought her on canvas. I did something no one expected, not my friends, not my art community, not even her. I locked myself inside my studio for 30 days. No visitors. No calls. Just me, my music, and my rage. I took every single piece she had a claim to, every portrait, every landscape, every intimate abstract expression of my soul, and I painted over them. But not just mindless destruction. No. I painted stories on top of stories. I let the pain speak through every new layer. And what came out was something different. Something raw. Something real. I called it the Ghost Collection, a series of 12 massive canvases layered with glimpses of the originals underneath. You could still see faint outlines of the past, blurred and buried, like memories you wish you could forget but never fully do. People connected to it in ways I never imagined. The first time I unveiled it, I had strangers crying in front of me. Art critics called it revolutionary. Therapy in motion. My inbox exploded. Offers came in. Big ones. She came back when she saw the buzz. Demanded her cut. Said I vandalized our property. But here's the thing, these weren't the same paintings anymore. And legally, they were new works, new copyrights, new life. And she had no claim to these ghosts of the past. You see, when you try to own someone else's story, you forget they still hold the pen. But I'll stop right there. Because what happened next, what I did after that final gallery night, it changed everything. Not just for me, but for her. And for everyone who thought they could write me off. I want you to sit tight because we're just getting started. You're going to want to hear what happened when she tried to take me to court again. When she showed up at my art auction, uninvited. When the final canvas was revealed. The one that no one knew about. The one I never intended to sell. But someone bought it anyway. Someone who changed the entire game. Someone who made sure she'd never come near me or my art again. And yet, it wasn't who you think. So don't go anywhere. Because this story, it's not over yet. The truth is, I didn't see it coming. Not the breakup, not the betrayal, not the legal battle, and definitely not the silence that followed. After the final gallery show of my original work, things should have slowed down, maybe even found a rhythm again. But that's not how life works when the ground beneath you has been slowly cracking for years. In hindsight, there were signs, flickers of discontent behind her smiles, side comments during dinner parties, that cold distance that crept in like paint seeping into an unprimed canvas. I had just chosen to ignore them, the way you ignore a squeaky door hinge until it finally snaps off. We had become less like partners and more like roommates who tolerated each other's presence for the sake of appearances. To the outside world, we were a creative power couple. She was the calculated manager with a sharp eye for profit, and I was the brooding artist, dripping paint and poetry. But behind closed doors, the connection had faded to static. Still, I never imagined she'd weaponize my vulnerability and use it against me like this. In the months leading up to the disaster, I was working on a collection I hadn't told anyone about. Not even her. It was different, darker, more visceral. Inspired less by beauty and more by disillusionment. I spent long hours alone in my loft, sometimes losing track of time, skipping meals, listening to late-night podcast interviews with people who'd clawed their way out of toxic relationships and built something unbreakable in their place. Those voices became my company. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since art school, documenting not just my ideas but my moods, my dreams, and the strange sense that something big, something unspoken, was about to shift. I didn't know if it would be creative, spiritual, or catastrophic. Turns out it was all three. The split wasn't just personal, it tore through our social circle like wildfire. Friends we once shared became cautious observers, choosing sides without saying a word. A few messaged me privately, claiming they always saw this coming, but their loyalty dissolved as quickly as it was typed. Others went radio silent, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. And then there was Damon, my mentor, my friend. The only one who showed up at my door the night I got served those papers, a six-pack in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. He didn't say much, just sat with me while I stared at the envelope on my kitchen counter like it was about to bite me. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks before that night, but he showed up like he knew I'd need him, like he was waiting for something to fall apart. Damon had always been a little intense, brilliant, but brooding. The kind of guy who believed in karma more than contracts and who once told me that a true artist is born in the rubble, not the spotlight. He was one of the first people to believe in my work, way before the collectors, way before the Instagram followers and the gallery reps who used words like emerging talent to mean cheap enough to bet on. He taught me how to see the negative space, not just in art, but in life. But recently, there was something off about him. He had been cagey, evasive. There were whispers he was working on something big, something controversial, but no one knew the details. He'd gotten close to my ex near the end, too close. She once joked that they were creative soulmates, and I laughed it off at the time, but now I wasn't so sure. When I brought it up, he brushed it off with a smirk and told me I was too paranoid for a painter. Still, I kept one eye on him, just in case. And then there was the intern, Maya. She came into my studio just a month before the breakup, sent by a local art school to assist with the day-to-day chaos. Young, eager, bright-eyed, and always asking too many questions, especially about the locked cabinet where I stored my older, unfinished works. At first, I found her enthusiasm charming, refreshing even. But then I noticed her slipping into the studio after hours, claiming she forgot her sketchbook or needed to drop something off. My ex adored her, said she reminded her of herself when she was younger, ambitious and driven. That alone should have been my warning. People like that always see reflections of themselves in those they think they can mold. As my relationship unraveled, my art took on a new tone. It was no longer about form or balance or marketability. It became raw documentation of betrayal, of survival. I began painting things I never thought I'd reveal to the public. Memories, secrets, metaphors hidden behind thick layers of texture and shadow. Each piece felt like confession and resistance at the same time. And with every new layer I painted over the old, I felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself she'd tried to file under joint assets. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Not in the paranoid, tinfoil hat way, but in the small, unsettling signs. An open sketchbook moved a few inches from where I left it. A USB drive I never used suddenly plugged into my computer. A message from an anonymous Instagram account with just one sentence. "How much is a memory worth to you?" I never responded, but it haunted me. The final straw came when I discovered a replica of one of my early paintings, one I had never shared publicly, up for auction on a small European art site under a different artist's name. It was unmistakably mine, down to the hidden signature etched into the bottom left corner in ultraviolet ink. And the name listed under provenance. A shell company tied to an account my ex had once used to manage my gallery bookings. It was then I realized, this wasn't just about ownership. It was about erasure. She wasn't trying to profit off my past. She was trying to rewrite it without me in it. I began tracing the chain of custody, reaching out to galleries, checking metadata, even contacting some of the buyers. Most ignored me. A few were confused, surprised. One collector told me he'd purchased a lost piece, authenticated by a new agency based out of Chicago, a firm that had recently launched, run by someone named T. Hallow. I didn't know the name, but Damon did. His old alias from when he used to do underground art expos back in the early 2000s. I wish I could tell you I stopped there, that I confronted them, and it ended clean. But the truth is, the rabbit hole only got deeper. The more I pulled, the more I found. Files on a shared drive I never knew existed. Photographs of my sketches taken without my permission. Contracts drafted with forged signatures. And at the center of it all, a single name that kept coming up again and again, in emails, in whispers, in backroom gallery conversations. Someone I thought had left the city years ago. Someone who had every reason to hate me. But I'll get to that. Just not yet. Because what happened next changed everything. The more I dug, the more the world around me seemed to shift, like I had pulled one thread too many, and now the whole tapestry of my life was unraveling in slow, deliberate strands. It started with something small, a folder on my laptop that vanished overnight. It wasn't something I'd uploaded online or stored in the cloud, just a collection of reference photos, handwritten scans of ideas I hadn't shared with anyone but myself. They were tied to a new series I was secretly developing, one that incorporated pieces of my childhood, old neighborhood scenes, people who had passed, deeply personal moments I had never even spoken about. When I searched for them the next morning, the folder was just gone. No backup. No trace in the recycling bin. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I deleted it by accident. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe grief and paranoia were starting to play tricks on me. But when I noticed someone had logged into my Wi-Fi at 3:42 a.m. the night before, an unfamiliar device labeled NT Tablet 01, The weight of it all started to sink in. This wasn't carelessness. Someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly what to look for. Then came the email. It was anonymous, of course. No subject line. Just a single sentence. Some stories are better left unfinished. Attached was a photo, blurry, low resolution, but unmistakably taken from the alleyway across from my studio. You could see the faint glow of my skylight, the window slightly cracked, my shadow on the wall, hunched over a canvas. Someone had been there. Someone close. I tried to track the IP address, but it bounced through multiple proxies. A dead end. I called the police, but they filed a report and told me unless there was evidence of a break-in or theft, there wasn't much they could do. I was alone in this, and whoever was behind it knew that. They were counting on it. Damon, who had been my one lifeline through all of this, suddenly became distant. He stopped replying to messages, canceled a studio visit last minute, and when I showed up at his place, he was gone. No note. No explanation. Just a dusty voicemail message and an unlocked mailbox stuffed with unopened gallery invites. It didn't make sense. Damon never ghosted. He was dramatic, sure, but he didn't disappear. I started wondering if he had gotten in over his head, or if maybe he'd never really left hers. The thought made my stomach turn. To make matters worse, the gallery that had helped me sell the Ghost collection suddenly pulled out of our agreement. They claimed there was a discrepancy in the provenance of one of the pieces, something about disputed ownership that made the lawyers nervous. They were polite but firm. The piece in question? A layered portrait titled Inheritance, the most personal one of them all. What no one knew, not even my ex, was that beneath the newer paint was an older self-portrait I had made at 17, during the darkest period of my life. It was raw and painful, and never meant for the public. I had painted over it because I couldn't bear to look at it, but now it was out there, and someone knew what lay underneath. Someone who was using my past against me. The gallery refused to tell me who raised the concern. Legal confidentiality, they said. But I had a hunch. Maya. She had been around during the creation of that piece. Always hovering, always watching, always asking questions that felt just a bit too curious. I remembered catching her taking photos one night when she thought I wasn't looking. She had claimed it was for a school project, but now I wasn't so sure. I tried calling her. Disconnected. I checked the art school she said she was attending. No record of her in the student database. It was like she'd never existed. The thought chilled me. Had she been planted? Was she working for someone? I started questioning everyone. Every assistant, every curator, every fan who had reached out to me online in the past year. There were too many coincidences. Too many people with access. Too many ways this could have unraveled without me noticing until it was too late. I found myself losing sleep, staring at the ceiling, wondering who I had trusted that I shouldn't have. The worst part? I was starting to doubt my own memory. Had I signed those contracts with my ex under pressure and simply forgotten? Had Damon told me more than I recalled, and I just wasn't listening? Was Maya really an imposter, or had I imagined her gaps out of desperation to find someone to blame? Then something strange happened. I received a package. No return address. Just a plain brown envelope taped shut with red string. Yes, red string. Like some scene from a conspiracy thriller. Inside were two things. A USB drive and an old Polaroid. The photo was faded, probably 15 years old, maybe more. It showed a young version of me, clearly in high school, standing next to someone I didn't immediately recognize. But the handwriting on the back told me everything. She knew you long before you knew her. My hands trembled as I plugged in the USB. It was a single video file, grainy, time-stamped from years ago, and in it, I saw something that stopped my heart cold. There she was, my ex, much younger, sitting across from Damon in what looked like a tiny basement studio.
And between them?
A painting, one of mine, from before I even met her, which means she lied about when we met. Everything she told me, how we randomly crossed paths at an art fair, how she fell in love with my work at first sight, how we grew together from the beginning. It was all fake. She had known who I was long before she ever introduced herself. And that painting? It was never meant to be sold. I had donated it anonymously to a mental health charity auction when I was barely 20. How did she get it? How long had she been following me? And more importantly, why? I don't have the answers yet. But I know one thing for sure now. This wasn't just about art. It never was. And the person pulling the strings might not be her at all. It had barely been 24 hours since I watched that grainy, distorted video when my phone buzzed with a message that pulled me deeper into the unraveling maze. It wasn't from a number I recognized, and it didn't come with a name or any traceable ID. Just a screenshot. At first glance, it looked like a blurry image of a storage unit. But the more I looked, the more I realized it wasn't just any unit. It was one I hadn't seen in years. One I had rented back in college, during a time when I was broke, unhinged, and painting feverishly without sleep. I had stored dozens of my early canvases there, too emotionally raw or incomplete to show anyone. When I moved in with my ex, she told me the fees were a waste and convinced me to shut it down. I assumed everything was trashed, but the unit number in the photo was the same, which means someone had kept it open. Someone had paid to preserve it without telling me. And now it looked like someone had broken into it. Or maybe they'd always had a key. The realization hit me like a punch to the ribs. This wasn't just about what was taken from me, it was about what was never really mine to begin with. I started reaching out to the storage company, but records had mysteriously gone missing. The employee I spoke to said the account had been flagged for privacy, whatever that meant. She sounded nervous, like she was reading from a script. When I pushed harder, she told me someone had been in 2 weeks ago, using identification that matched the name, Elena Morris. The name meant nothing to me at first, until I remembered it was my ex's mother. A woman she always claimed had died when she was young. A woman I never met. A woman she never spoke of. That same night, Damon's sister, Claire, called me. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since a falling out involving an old group exhibit that went sideways and ended friendships overnight. But her voice was breathless, urgent, and full of fear. She said she'd found something in Damon's storage closet, something he had asked her to burn if anything happened to him. Of course, curiosity got the better of her. She opened it. Inside was a stack of photographs. Photos of my old studio, my apartment, even a few of me sleeping, taken through windows I thought were too high to reach. But what chilled me most was the one at the bottom of the pile, a candid shot of my parents' house in Vermont. The porch, the garden, everything. I hadn't been there in years, hadn't spoken to my father since the funeral. Claire said Damon had written one word on the back of that photo in bold, red ink. Return. I couldn't make sense of it. None of it added up. Damon had always been intense, but I never thought of him as someone capable of watching me like that.
Stalking me.
Or worse, protecting me from something I didn't yet understand. I started asking myself questions I didn't want answers to. Had Damon been involved from the very beginning? Had he orchestrated my meeting with her? Was the mentorship all part of a longer con? The possibility sickened me, and yet I couldn't dismiss it. Especially not after what Claire told me next, that the day Damon disappeared, he left behind a note. For words, don't trust the gallery. At first, it seemed like paranoia. The gallery world was messy, cutthroat, filled with egos and under-the-table deals, but I'd always believed my rep, Noah, was clean. We'd started small together. He was one of the only people who believed in me before my work hit mainstream visibility. He helped broker my first major auction. But now, with Damon's words echoing in my mind, I started re-examining everything. I called Noah, asked him directly if he had ever worked with my ex behind my back. His voice faltered. Just for a second. And in that moment I knew. Still, he denied everything. He told me I was spiraling, that grief and stress were making me paranoid, that maybe it was time to take a break. But as we were talking, I noticed something strange. A background noise, barely audible at first, but rhythmic. Like typing.
Fast.
Then a voice in the background, quiet, almost whispering. Female. I strained to hear what she was saying, but the line went dead before I could make it out. Less than 5 minutes later, I got another message, this time a video. It was my piece, Inheritance, but not the version I sold. It was a high-definition scan, before the final layer had been added. The layer that covered the older painting underneath. The scan showed everything, my original teenage self-portrait, exposed, vulnerable, unmistakably mine. And on the bottom of the frame was a watermark, property of Atlas Archives. I'd never heard of Atlas Archives. I searched online, but nothing real came up. A few Reddit threads with cryptic references, rumors about an underground collection of confiscated or rescued artwork by mentally unwell or disappeared artists. Some claimed it was a front for laundering stolen art. Others believed it was tied to private collectors who bought art that couldn't legally be sold. The idea was outrageous. But the watermark was real. And it was on my painting. I contacted the one person I knew who might understand the implications, a former professor of mine who had gone dark after he exposed a major forgery ring a decade ago. He called me back at 2 a.m., his voice hoarse and shaking. When I told him the name Atlas Archives, he went silent. Then he whispered, "They shouldn't know you're looking. Whatever you do, stop." But I can't stop now. Not after everything. Not when the lines between art, memory, identity, and truth have blurred into something I can no longer separate. I keep wondering if I ever had control, or if I've been walking someone else's path this whole time. Was my ex really the architect of this betrayal? Or was she just a piece on the board, like me? What happened to Damon? Why did he vanish just as things began to surface? And who is behind the Atlas Archives? Just this morning, I received another package. Same red string. No return address. Inside was only one item. A paintbrush.
Mine.
The same one I threw away 10 years ago, after the fire. The one no one was supposed to know about. The fire that destroyed the only painting I ever swore to forget. But if the brush survived, what else did? The first real moment of fear, the kind that clings to your ribs and doesn't let go, hit me on a rainy Thursday evening. The kind of day where the sky looks like bruised concrete and the streets bleed with color from taillights and soaked flyers. I had just left a coffee shop in Williamsburg, one of those little places that plays too much jazz and charges extra for oat milk, but I needed the noise. I needed to pretend things were normal. I had headphones in, hood up, and for a minute I let myself believe I was still just an artist in a city that didn't care. But then I noticed it. A black sedan idling across the street. Not unusual in Brooklyn, but when I crossed the block, so did it. Slow, deliberate, never overtaking me, just pacing. I cut through a side alley I knew well, past a graffiti mural I helped paint during an old artist collective residency, and that's when I felt it. That crawling presence behind you, not footsteps but the sense of them. I turned fast. Nothing. Just puddles and wind, and a flickering security light. But my heart wouldn't slow down. When I got back to my studio loft, the door was locked just like I left it, but the air felt wrong. The kind of wrong you can't explain to anyone else without sounding like a lunatic. My canvases were untouched, my laptop in place, but something had shifted. I moved through the space slowly, scanning every shelf, drawer, sketchpad. That's when I found it, tucked beneath a pile of brushes, inside an old coffee tin I hadn't opened in years. A single Polaroid, just like before. But this one was recent. It was me, asleep, shirtless, a sliver of my arm tattoo visible, curled up in the corner of the studio couch under the patchwork blanket my mom made me when I left for art school. The angle of the shot overhead, like someone had been standing directly above me, watching, waiting. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down to stop the room from spinning. I hadn't invited anyone in. No parties, no guests, no assistants in weeks. Whoever took it had been here while I slept. Maybe more than once. I called the police again. This time they sent someone. A uniformed officer, polite but detached, clearly more annoyed than concerned. He asked if I had enemies, if I had exes with grudges, if I was on drugs. He offered to file a report and gave me a flyer about personal safety tips in creative spaces. He didn't even look at the Polaroid. Said unless there was evidence of forced entry, it didn't qualify as a threat. But I knew what it was. A warning. Not the kind with loud noises or flashing red letters, but the quiet kind. The kind that says, "We're already inside your life." And then Claire disappeared. I had been texting her updates every couple days since she found the photographs, just enough to keep her in the loop, but not enough to scare her. She was staying at her brother's place while sorting through his things, still hoping he'd come back, still convinced this was just another one of Damon's dramatic retreats from reality. When she stopped answering for a full day, I thought maybe she was overwhelmed. But by the second day, her phone went straight to voicemail. Her last message to me had been simple. "I found something. Meet me Friday. Don't bring your phone." But Friday came and went and she didn't show. I checked with her job. She hadn't been in since Tuesday. I went to Damon's apartment, where she'd been staying, and the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the place was trashed. Not ransacked, not robbed, more like someone had been searching for something specific. The couch cushions were slid open, the backs of framed prints removed. Even the hollow parts of the baseboards had been chipped away. Whoever did it knew what they were looking for. I called 911, but by the time officers arrived, the place had been cleaned, scrubbed of any obvious evidence, no fingerprints, no prints on the Polaroid I found later stuck to the fridge with a single magnet. This time it wasn't of me. It was Claire, tied to a chair, blindfolded. The timestamp on the bottom showed it was taken 2 days ago. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped my phone. The weight of everything hit me all at once. The secrecy, the buried paintings, the erased files, Damon's cryptic warning, the gallery silence, the Polaroids, the locked unit, the Atlas archives, the false timelines, the fire. It was all connected somehow. I just couldn't see the whole picture yet. Like staring at a massive canvas up close, just brushstrokes and chaos, until you step back and see what's been there all along. Except I wasn't stepping back. I was being pulled deeper in. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards became footsteps. Every shadow, a shape. I kept the lights on, sat with my back against the door, holding the only weapon I had, a rusted utility knife I used to cut canvas. I didn't feel safe. Not in my studio. Not on my block. Not even in my own mind. Because the paranoia wasn't just about what was out there anymore. It was about what I might have missed right in front of me. I started reviewing old emails, message threads with my ex, voice memos from Damon, even the years-old artist statements I'd written. That's when I noticed it. A pattern. Phrases that kept reappearing. Words like catalog, unclaimed memory, archival disruption. I dismissed them before as artistic jargon, conceptual filler. But now I saw them everywhere, like Easter eggs I had unknowingly planted for myself. And the more I followed them, the more I realized I had been repeating someone else's words, parroting ideas that had been fed to me years ago. Had I ever really been original? Or was I a curated narrative in someone else's exhibit? I don't know who to trust anymore. Every familiar face feels like a mask. Every interaction feels rehearsed. I've stopped opening the curtains. I've stopped using my phone unless absolutely necessary. The paintbrush they sent me, the one from the fire, is now locked in a safe I've hidden behind my studio drywall. I keep looking at it like it holds a key to all of this. To the fire. To her. To the painting I swore I burned. But what if I never did? What if someone else pulled it from the ashes and kept it? It was just after 3 in the morning when the twist came, not like a thunderclap, not with chaos and screaming, but with something far more unsettling. A whisper of realization. The kind of truth that sinks in quietly, slowly, like ink bleeding through the fibers of a canvas. I hadn't planned on revisiting the drive. The one from the red string package. I had already gone through the video, the photographs, the obvious pieces. But something kept pulling me back to it, an unease I couldn't name. So I ran a deeper scan, a forensic sweep I'd borrowed from a friend who freelanced in digital recovery. And that's when I found it, hidden in the metadata. Not just the files, but where they'd originated. Not from Damon. Not from my ex. Not from some anonymous dark web archive. The GPS tags placed them in a gallery basement in Soho. A gallery I knew intimately, because it was where I had my very first solo show. A place I thought had long since changed hands. But the owner, The woman who had helped me launch my career and then disappeared without warning years ago. She hadn't vanished. She'd changed her name. And her new identity? Elena Morris. The same name my ex used for the storage unit. The same woman she claimed was her dead mother. Everything stopped. Time folded in on itself as connections lit up in my brain, one after another, like a matchbox catching fire. I had known Elena, or whatever her real name was, as a tough but visionary gallerist. The kind who could spot potential a mile away and mold it to her liking. She found me when I was barely surviving on ramen and late-night commissions, sleeping in a warehouse with broken heat, and painting with borrowed supplies. She promised me a future, mentorship, stability. But something had gone sour near the end. There was a falling out over the rights to a series of pieces she claimed were co-conceptualized, though I knew better. She said my art was part of a broader initiative, words that didn't make sense at the time. I accused her of trying to control me. She accused me of being ungrateful. And then she vanished. But now she was back, alive, well, orchestrating something bigger than I ever imagined. And the sickening part? My ex wasn't just her daughter. She was part of the operation. It was never about love. It was never about our relationship crumbling under creative tension or emotional distance. It had been a setup from the beginning. From the first time she introduced herself at that gallery mixer, to the way she accidentally stumbled into a discussion about artistic process, to the way she offered to help organize my digital archives when we moved in together. She hadn't just inserted herself into my life. She had been placed there. Groomed for it, trained for it. My ex was the perfect insider. Charming, intelligent, business savvy, emotionally adaptable. She knew exactly how to manipulate me without raising alarms. And all this time, I thought I was mourning a breakup, a betrayal of the heart. But I was mourning something that was never real. The revelation came with a wave of nausea, so intense I had to steady myself against the wall. My memories, my life, were suddenly questionable. What did I actually choose? What did I create on my own? Had even my early success been mine, or part of a pre-designed push, a crafted narrative meant to position me not as an artist, but as a product? And that's when I remembered Maya, the eager intern who had shown up out of nowhere, who had asked all the right questions, who vanished just as things began to crack. I dug up the school program she said she came from, nothing. But when I ran a facial recognition sweep on her photo through a secure forum a hacker friend of mine helped set up years ago, a result finally pinged. Her real name was Jamie Lennox. And she wasn't a student. She was listed as a project coordinator for something called the Continuity Lab, a shadow organization rumored in artist forums and whistleblower threads. The kind that buys or collects art that can't, or shouldn't, be released to the public. Works tied to mental breakdowns, criminal trials, disputed identities. And the kicker? One of the Continuity Lab's biggest investors was none other than the Atlas Archives. The entire puzzle clicked into place. I wasn't being watched because I was dangerous. I was being watched because I was unraveling. And they were afraid I might stumble into the truth too soon. That I might remember the painting. The fire. The reason I erased a year of my life in the first place. Because 10 years ago, during the fire that nearly ended everything, I didn't just lose a canvas. I lost a person, a friend, a collaborator, someone no one ever talked about again. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the real reason they're all watching me now is because I wasn't supposed to survive either. It all came to a head in an abandoned industrial building on the edge of Red Hook, Brooklyn, a place I hadn't set foot in since my early 20s, when I was part of a collective that staged underground exhibits before we were gallery ready. Back then, the building had been alive with wild energy and risk. Now it stood hollow, cold, and stripped of its soul. I had followed the trail here, coordinates embedded in the metadata of a recovered video, the final piece in a puzzle that had consumed my life. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. Dust and silence blanketed the space, but beneath it there was something else. Anticipation, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I moved through the darkened corridors guided only by the light of my phone, my heart thudding loud enough to drown out every creak beneath my feet. On the far wall of the main room was a projection, an image I recognized instantly. The painting from the fire. The one I had sworn was destroyed. But there it was, not in flames, not covered, not altered, whole, untouched. And next to it, standing with her arms folded as if waiting for a late train, was her. My ex calm, collected, her expression unreadable. As if this had been nothing more than an overdue appointment. "You're finally here," she said. "I was starting to wonder if you'd cracked it or just cracked." Every word was a blade. But I didn't respond. I couldn't.
Not yet.
I needed answers before I could allow myself the collapse. Behind her, lit only by flickering floodlights, were rows of canvases. Not mine exactly, but versions of them, twisted, fragmented, stitched together like some Frankenstein archive of everything I'd ever painted and everything I'd forgotten. It was like staring into the mind of someone who had dissected my life and reassembled it for an audience I never knew was watching. She explained everything with the calm detachment of someone reciting a business proposal. The painting from the fire had never been destroyed. It had been retrieved, by her, by Elena, by Atlas. The fire, she said, was the moment they decided I had become unpredictable, that my work had crossed into territory too volatile to let evolve on its own. What I thought was survival had been management. My recovery, my rise in the art world, my breakthrough moments, they were all curated events, controlled responses. I had become a high-value asset in a secret network designed to protect, preserve, and, when necessary, manipulate the minds of artists whose work had the power to destabilize. Not society, not politics, but narrative itself. "You think people consume art for beauty," she said. "They consume it because they want reality redefined. You gave them that. But you didn't know how to own it. So we did it for you." I felt something inside me break, not rage, not despair, but a rupture in the core belief that I had ever been steering my own ship. My thoughts, my style, my success, even my breakdowns, every step had been framed like a gallery wall. But then she made a mistake. She turned to a small pedestal beside the projection screen and lifted a box. Inside was the paintbrush. My paintbrush. Not the one from the fire, but the one from the night before it. The one I had last used on him. The person no one spoke of. The one whose death had been ruled an accident. My friend. The collaborator. The only person who had known the truth of what I had painted on that canvas that night. She held it out like a trophy. "You buried him in your art," she said, "and they loved you for it. But you should have burned the brush too." That was it. The final piece. He hadn't died in the fire by accident. He'd been painted into the work, his memory, his trauma, our fight, the truth. And when he vanished, they needed a story. So they made one. I'd always blamed myself in the foggy corners of my mind, but now I understood. I didn't kill him.
They did.
And they hid it in my masterpiece. Turned it into a symbol of mental resilience. An exhibit centerpiece. A profitable myth. The confrontation didn't end in violence. It ended with choice. She offered me a seat at the table. Atlas wanted me back. They were prepared to give me a new series, a new identity, even a new tragedy to paint around. All I had to do was forget. Walk away. Let the story be rewritten one last time. But I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the back of the room, picked up the only original canvas left, the one that still had my blood in the brushstrokes, and did what I should have done years ago. I set it on fire. And as the flames rose, so did the alarms, the building's ancient systems screaming to life. In the chaos, she disappeared.
Of course she did.
Because people like her don't face consequences. They vanish into boardrooms and burner phones. But here's the twist no one saw coming. The fire didn't consume the truth. Because before I lit the match, I scanned the painting, layer by layer, infrared and ultraviolet, documented it all. Not for the public. Not for the gallery world. But for me. For the record. For the truth. Because stories like mine don't end with vindication. They end with testimony. And now, you know the story they tried to bury. Now the Real exhibit begins. In the weeks that followed, the noise faded. Not because things settled, but because the people pulling the strings chose silence over spectacle. The gallery in Soho shuttered without warning. No statement, no public notice. Just a "for lease" sign pasted over its steel front like the end of an expired dream. Alice Archives removed its public directory, pulled their investor-facing site offline, and every link that once hinted at their influence now redirected to dead ends or error messages. It was like the organization had never existed at all. But I knew better. I had stared into the heart of it. I had seen the brushstrokes of manipulation, the fingerprints of design hiding behind layers of narrative. And I had lived to walk away from it. I relocated to a small cabin upstate. No internet. No assistance. Just me, the woods, and a collection of blank canvases I refused to touch for the first month. For the first time in over a decade, I had no deadlines, no sponsors, no exhibit openings with plastic champagne and synthetic applause. I was free. But freedom didn't feel how I imagined. It was quiet, yes, but heavy. Like waking up in someone else's dream and realizing your own story had been paused. I spent long mornings walking along the tree line, cataloging the colors of the sky and how the shadows moved across the leaves, not because I was preparing to paint them, but because I needed to remember what it was like to see something without needing to explain it. I started journaling again, not digitally, not for interviews or social content, but by hand, ink on paper. Thoughts that wouldn't be archived or analyzed or sliced into marketing copy. Just raw memory. Claire never turned up. Not a body, not a message, not even a clue. The Polaroid was the last thread, and I kept it, faded, bent at the corners, taped to the back of my sketchbook as a reminder that some ghosts never settle. Damon's sister had once said, "Some people vanish because they want to be found in pieces, not all at once." I finally understood what she meant. I stopped looking for her answers and started accepting mine. As for my ex, I heard whispers, secondhand mentions from friends of friends that she'd surfaced under a new name in Berlin, curating for a startup art tech firm that dealt in encrypted visual storytelling. I laughed when I read that phrase. It was exactly her style. Polished, layered, hiding the truth behind clever words. I don't plan on reaching out. She was never just a villain. Never just a manipulator. She was a product of something bigger. A system built not to destroy artists, but to consume them gently, slowly, until there's nothing left but image and myth. I don't hate her anymore. But I'll never forgive her either. And then there's the painting. The one I burned. The one that started it all. Some say fire cleanses, but that's not true. Fire reveals. Underneath the ashes, I found something unexpected. A scrap of canvas that survived. Blackened, charred at the edges, but intact enough to show a detail I had forgotten. 2 intertwined initials, etched faintly into the corner. Mine. And his. The friend I lost in the fire. The collaborator I never spoke of. The piece we created together before everything collapsed. I framed that fragment. Not for display. Not for profit. But as proof that something real had existed beneath the chaos. A flicker of authenticity before the world painted over it. I've started painting again. Slowly. Quietly. But differently. I no longer work for an audience. I don't post online, don't take commissions, don't pitch galleries. What I create now is for no one but me. Some canvases are filled with silence. Some with grief. Some with joy I didn't think I'd ever feel again. Each one holds a piece of truth too dangerous to name, but too sacred to discard. And here's the part you didn't expect. The twist that still lingers. A few days ago, I received a package. No note. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. On it, a single file. A photo. Claire. Smiling. Alive. And standing in front of a wall of paintings that don't belong to anyone. Yet. So maybe the story isn't over. Maybe it never was. Maybe we were never meant to burn it all down. Just to start painting again. With our own hands on our own terms. This time in the light.